So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the Aurum feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, it's very important understanding the Hamashiach ben Yosef and the many references he made regarding this great prophet, because the nations of the time of Yeshayahu and the nations during the time of the Hamashiach ben Yosef, the promised Mashiach, they were experiencing similar situations as far as trying to organize a system of government based from certain beliefs that was mixed with facts. So, Mechachayahu, the 24th chapter, then the Hamashiach ben Yosef, as he was relational with his own people, because he had a direct relationship with Yod-Heh Vav-Heh Galah. That's what the whole section of this specific chapter relates. And then, as the people they were involved with the Hamashiach ben Yosef, the understanding of Melech, or then the lineage from Melech David, the Hamashiach then was explaining many sections of this portion of the Holy Instructions, because we find understandings of these related with then later on Shaliach Shaul. So Shaliach Shaul, he had the same particular content of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh Galah as was the Hamashiach ben Yosef, because they were explaining the situations related with the Holy Instructions, and also Vayikra, the 23rd chapter. So the Revelations sections of the Holy Instructions that Shaul was explaining, the Hamashiach ben Yosef already had explained before. So, when the Shaliach Shaul was explaining in the Netzer that came from King David, the Hamashiach ben Yosef is explaining also yet the kingdom coming in the future after the Yom Kippur, and he is explaining sections of this kingdom as Yod-Heh Vav-Heh as their Melech. But then the Hamashiach goes a step further, and the Hamashiach ben Yosef said he is not making a reference of his people as their subjects, but as partners with. So then the idea of Melech, a portion of it came from first the first king of the holy nation, Shaul. He made a secular understanding of Melech, or kingship, because the objective of Shaul was organize the armies and fight against the Philistines and rid the land from foreign nations, foreign pagan tribes. So when the people they were obviously speaking with the Hamashiach, he was then, as the text explains, he went out of the temple and he departed, and he is then his own drew near and were showing him the construction of the temple. The Hamashiach ben Yosef, he had scholarship. Many people, they don't invest time studying the scriptures, studying the original manuscripts, and they don't understand. There was, quote unquote, a place where then the people learned the instructions. They learned the scripture. The city of Pella, for instance, they had a place there of learning of these instructions. That's what a lot of rabbis came from. So he was studied. The problem is, for instance, in many countries, people don't invest time studying the holy instructions. They don't invest time studying the history of the time. And they live in a cloud of beliefs that simply doesn't exist. And traditions are handed down, and when a person with a basic knowledge of the holy instructions glanced at it, then the main factor is give your personal testimony of the instructions. And most often, 9 out of 10, you'll find then these are very badly made, because they don't have a testimony of their own. So, reading from the holy instructions, the Hamashiach ben Yosef came out of the temple, then his own, we are not talking about secular people, his very own. So why his very own came to him after he went out of the temple? When a person goes to the temple and giving a teaching, a person is very much in line with the holy instructions. So the Hamashiach was aware of it. But then, no, there was a system that his own, they were trying to show him. And there he was. And then the people, his very own, were showing him the construction of the temple. In other words, they were implying he can become a permanent section of the system these people were trying to present. That's what the whole situation is related with. But then the Hamashiach, before the situation was taking place, he said, behold. In other words, hey boys, don't you observe what you are trying to say? The Mashiach came directly against the systems they are trying to present. And then he said, truly, these that you are speaking of won't be spared. And then not a stone shall be left upon another. So the structure of the temple, the system they were wishing for, the kingship they were trying to establish, the Hamashiach did not want any of it. Now that's a system of your own. And that's why then the Hamashiach ben Yosef later on says, and the nations then shall be in uproar. Not because he's enticing war and situations such as, but he simply says he's not part of this system during this time and age. Because Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is not part of this age. Certain sections of the holy instructions must be completed prior of, including the autumn feast. So then, there is a level of fact and faith. There is a level of wishing for it in a certain way. There is the mixing of the person of the Hamashiach ben Yosef and facts and faith. And many people, they get confused because, how come he must become king yet? But the Hamashiach is explaining there is no kingship until the holy instructions are completed. That's why then, previously, he was absolutely not a jot. It's going to be left undone until it's completed, then the kingdom. Because he was speaking of the restoration period, many centuries in the future, then the autumn feast, and then post-autumn feast, as per Yeshayahu, the 65th and 66th chapter. But people, when they get together, they go in those religious establishments, and people simply, they don't understand the instructions. They don't spend time studying the original manuscripts. It's similar as many people complain because of products of China. You're always complaining. But they don't think of the price. So if you want a product that has a higher quality, there are certain ways of receiving higher quality products. So why do they complain so much of the Chinese products if they are buying it? If they think the product is low quality, don't purchase. So this is what is related with the instructions. People are buying cheap translations. They form in their heads as, oh great, this is a very cheap Chinese product, it should work as the original product of high quality. That's the relation that people are making. So they can't buy a cheap product and expect to perform as per the original product that's highly organized and made. Then they believe in their own GODs or LORDs or whatever else, and they force themselves in the situations precisely as his own were forced in the situation when he came out of the temple. They were trying to force the Hamashiach ben Yosef in receiving their plans of kingship. And then it came a point that they asked him again, and the Hamashiach ben Yosef also said, while he was there on the Mount of Olives, then once again they came to him. So the point is, the first time when he came out of the temple, his own came to him and trying to manipulate his mind to do what they wanted, and they couldn't do it. Then they are gathering up on the Mount of Olives. That's the second time. And the disciples, came around and asked him, so then, so then say, what is going to be like the end? Prior of the coming of the kingship, what is it going to be like? And then Hamashiach, of course, he said, be aware, you boys, you are involved in a cloud of stupidity. Be aware, let no person deceives you, let no system prior of the time deceive you. For many will come in his name. And what do we have today? Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of congregations and churches speaking on his name, and I have no clue what they are saying. That's what he's speaking of. And then, for many shalt come in his name and saying, the Mashiach is this, the Mashiach is that, the Mashiach is the other, and this system this system that, this system the other. and many shall be deceived, as many churches are deceived. For you are bound to hear of wars and rumors of wars. He's talking about the uproars of the nations. That's why he does not want to mix himself with the rest of the world during his time. Because he was a representative of the presence of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So then, besides this, do not be disturbed, for it is required that these situations must take place. But the end is not yet. It's not time for the kingdom yet. For nations shall rise against nations, and kingdoms against kingdoms. And there are many sad times, and they deliver, the people of many situations and hatred and so on and so forth. So the Hamashiach is giving the proper understanding of the scripture. Now, the situation is, the prophets gave a very clear understanding, and people later on, they decided to believe some sort of a third-party translation, and they make up worlds that simply don't exist. Then, in fact, those people who are more in line with the holy instructions, then the people further don't believe it. And there are evidences of the system, it's simply ruined. But they force themselves in some type of new ways of their own, and they have done this for so long, and the Hamashiach is saying very precisely, it's not the time yet. So then secular government, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, has no part in them. He is concerned with his own instructions. Nations, they are on their own. Because the system of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, in line with the holy instructions, the time has not come yet. That's what the Hamashiach is explaining. But then people are so long deceived in 40 years in the desert, in manna coming from heaven. Where did they get this from? It's not from the original manuscripts. It's truly ridiculous thinking that some sort of a wafer rains down from heaven. Yeah, they don't understand that Jethro was very preparing their exodus for a long time. They don't understand. They had plantations, and they were making those kinds of bread. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh already gave a rough estimate how many people were coming. They already had prepared those provisions. But then mysticism got in the midst of it, and so on and so forth. So that's why then the people, when they left Mitzrayim, they did not go straight north to Canaan. They went to Midian. How going through the desert, barely with no provisions, and then going up and fight against armies? No, I have to have a place for rest first and organizing. So they went to Midian. That's where Jethro then showed them some understandings. They were able to gather up and farm around, and they were there for a while. And people think, oh, they want to believe something higher, but not stupid. Yeah, there are steps of formation as far as the destruction of the 5 cities, Umera, Barbadra, and those cities that were wicked. Those were examples of the destruction of the end. The rest of the world must function as per the creation. You have water, you have high tides, you have wind, you have the seasons of the years, you have the stars, the greater stars. And these must function orderly. So the next time we're going to evaluate more what the Hamashiach ben Yosef said. Because truly he was a great prophet, the promised prophet by Moses, and he explained what the prophets previously had explained. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.